answers.
We'll get started.
This copies the answers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for coming this evening and welcome. Before we formally start the agenda, we've got a short announcement from Councillor Stuart Munro.
Thank you. Just to say that item 30 on the agenda, the Matthews Green Community Facility, this report relating to the growth operator of the Matthews Green Community Facility has been withdrawn. This is because the King's Church Working Given no longer wish to be considered as potential operator, so this item has been withdrawn.
Thank you very much indeed. The first item is the item number 19, the minutes of the previous meeting, page 7 to 14. Does anyone have any... Sorry, apologies. Sorry, I've written apologies. Item 18 is the apologies. Any apologies, please?
Councillor Philip Murphy has sent his apologies.
Councillor Philip Murphy has sent his apologies, and I believe none other. Thank you. Next item is the item 19, minutes of the previous meeting, pages 7 to 14. Does anyone have any questions, queries on those? No? If no one does, then can we take those as written in the agenda? Thank you very much indeed. The next item on the agenda is the item 20, declaration of interest. Does anyone have any? Councillor Stuart Munro.
So I have to declare an interest, Chairman, in the shareholder report item 24, as I am a paid non-executive director of the Working Facility.
Thank you. Councillor Pauline Robinson. Councillor Norman Robinson.
I have to declare a personal interest in item 24 in that my wife is a non-executive director of Woking College.
Councillor Anthony Pollock.
I need to declare personal interest in agenda item 24, shareholders report, as I'm a paid non-executive director of Optist Holdings Limited.
Thank you very much indeed. And on to the public question time, and just a reminder that for public question time there's a period of 30 minutes allowed for members of the public to ask questions that are submitted under notice. So the first question this evening is from Trevor Sleet, and that's to Councillor Anthony Pollock. If you'd like to step forward, there's a microphone just on the table. You won't be filmed yourself, but just right. To your voice. Okay. Thank you.
My questions are concerned with the loss of a lollipop lady in Murray Road outside the schools of Walter, St Paul's and Meadow University. And my question is, has a cost-benefit analysis been carried out regarding the cost of the lollipop lady versus that of installing the pedestrian crossing and the running of that crossing?
Thank you very much for the question. It's to Councillor Anthony.
Broadly speaking, yes. However, this site is subject to a redesign.
Can you speak up?
Sorry. Broadly speaking, yes, but as this site is subject to a redesign following my intervention in the last few weeks, and so the cost benefit will be recalculated following the redesign.
And will that be made public?
Yes, it can.
Sorry.
Thank you very
I have a
much.
supplementary question.
Sorry, I thought that was your supplementary.
Huh?
Sorry, I thought that was your supplementary.
No, that was my full question.
No.
That was supplementary as well.
Your full question you read out at the beginning,
Yes.
and then you asked would it be made public?
Oh, that's, I would have thought it's a fait accompli it would be made public. And he can't give me those figures because he's redesigning it. So.
Okay. I will allow you on this occasion to ask a further supplementary, but there is only one supplementary.
Okay.
On this occasion, if you'd like to ask a further supplementary.
Right. I have a copy of the road safety audit report that was based on the decision that was used, the decision to remove the lollipop lady in Murray Road. And in that safety audit report, the site visit was done on the 13th of February when the schools were on half term. So it's no wonder there was no traffic at that time. Okay. My question will be therefore, will the Woking Borough Council accept the failings of this report and reinstate the lollipop lady?
I think I will answer it slightly differently. I attended the site on Monday along with our road safety auditor, and I observed the activity outside the school, and he was with me during that time. So I think the council has viewed that site during school times with school pupils going in and out of that school.
Can I add to that?
Sorry,
Would you like to see the dangerous parking by Councillor Pollock and the result, the problems it caused with the mothers? And I have that on video.
Okay, I'd like to thank you very much for bringing your questions this evening, and there are obviously some other things that you would like to ask Councillor Pollock about and issues that you've specifically got about that particular site. May I ask that you either telephone Councillor Pollock or coordinate some emails or have a specific meeting on site outside that school in order to take up those particular issues that you've raised tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. There's another question, question 21.2, which was withdrawn. The next question is from Sally Cairns, and that's to Councillor Pollock.
So the question was, can the decision about school crossing controllers be considered on a site-by-site basis? Because the number of consultation responses from the different sites seems to indicate very different levels of concern. And the full council meeting debate seemed to highlight situations very different outside the different schools in terms of how helpful a crossing is going to be given the road layout, and whether there are likely to be other groups of people wanting to cross the road in significant numbers at other times of the day. So my question is, does this have to be an all or nothing decision on the school crossing patrollers, or can the best solution be chosen for each location?
I have visited each of the sites concerned, along with officers, and the crossings have been designed with a specific reference of each site. That's what we've already done. We have undertaken, as we have taken into account the different characteristics of each site. We've done surveys of numbers of cars and numbers of children accessing the school. So I think we have done that, and I think certainly I've tried to look for solutions that will work at each site, to take into account each site's characteristics.
And so just a supplementary, but that seems to be a decision about what kind of crossing in each location. And I suppose my question is, it might be that a crossing is the best for some and keeping the school crossing patroller is the best for others, and it's whether there can be that flexibility in the decision.
I think as we've decided to withdraw the funding for the crossings a couple of years ago, I'm looking at what we put in to those sites to make them as safe as we can. So I think that is probably no.
Thank you
I'm
very much.
reading the next one. So.
Exactly. So stay put.
So this is a Ned's question, and she said, Councillor Pollock, having observed the situation at the Murray Road crossing on Monday morning and the constant fluctuation in the numbers of people wanting to cross, the queues of cars needing to get through, and the somewhat random parking behaviour, would you agree that a school crossing controller who can constantly adjust to what is happening is a better solution than any kind of formal crossing? And that although a fixed crossing in theory seems like a reliable long-term solution, in many ways it's actually risky, since you don't know how well it's going to work, particularly when the weather changes or there are roadworks on surrounding streets. And if additional measures are then needed, it could all then become much more expensive than the current efficient and adaptable school crossing patroller that you have.
As you say, I attended the school on Monday morning along with our road safety auditor. I attended from 8:15 till about 9:15. The first 20 minutes or so was without the school crossing controller being present, and I was particularly impressed by the courtesy of drivers towards the children crossing the road and seeking to cross the road. I didn't see any driver speed through the crossing when the child was there. I particularly saw one car very carefully stop and let the child and the parent cross. So my impression was, generally speaking, that the motorists were behaving particularly well. I do accept that there was a problem further down the road where a couple of cars tried to met each other as one came down, one went up, but I think that's nothing to do with school crossing patrol and is something to do with parking generally, and maybe that needs to be addressed or looked at. So I think that's separate from the school crossing patroller, and I don't think the school crossing patroller cited where she was could have intervened on those two cars that were sort of arguing with each other over a piece of road space. As far as the crossings themselves, we have replaced school crossing patrollers with crossings throughout the borough over the last 10 years or so, and I don't think any of them are more dangerous now than they were before. In some instances, where the traffic was of a higher speed than they are here, it was actually beneficial. As I've said, I'm going to look at this site particularly. Since I visited it when I was chairing the Education Committee, there are more children going to the site, so maybe some issues on that front. But the principle is I don't see that the crossing itself is inherently less safe than the school crossing patrol.
If I can ask one
I'm afraid
supplementary.
you can't ask a supplementary when you're asking a question on behalf of somebody else who wasn't able to attend, so I'm very sorry about that. Thank you very much indeed for asking a question on behalf of the Mayor. Thank you. The next question this evening is from Keith Marvin, and he's asked the Executive Member for Adult Social Care, that's Councillor Richard Talinsky. So, welcome, Keith.
Thank you very much. I could hear you, but not the previous member. My question is, in the People Services section of item 25, revenue monitoring end of June, I would like to congratulate the Council on, in quotes, the number of individuals living longer, as this demonstrates the Council's underpinning principles, which include looking after the vulnerable and improving health, well-being and quality of life. So a free commercial that I think ought to go somewhere in a press release. As the driver within adult social care is need and not cost, it's easy to understand budget difficulties. The government has been kind enough to allow local authorities to raise a special precept. So can I ask what percentage increase for this year, my writing is worse than I thought, you have applied for 2018-2019? And to further understand the costs, can you tell me what the national living wage has increased to have such an impact on placement prices? What do you think? I haven't read your answers. I always ask for a copy of your answer, but apparently I'm not allowed that. We've got copies here.
Okay. Well, good evening, Mr. Marvin. This is the first time I've had the pleasure of actually answering a question posed by
I
you.
look forward to that.
Okay. Well, I'm pleased that you've highlighted the Council's principle of looking after the vulnerable and improving the health.
Nobody else knows.
You are absolutely right. Need, and may I add demand, places budgetary pressures on our services.
Good.
In 2018-19, at the February 2018 budget set in Council, the Council raised an additional adult social care precept of 2.5%, which actually equated to £2,461,600. So it's £2,461,600. As the national living wage has increased to £5.90 per hour for those 18 to 20 and £7.38 per hour for the 20 to 24-year-olds, and then £7.83 per hour for the 25 years and over. That's meant a total of £480,636. So I'll just help you out there. It's four.
No, I'm not going to write.
You got it. I thought you were writing the numbers down. Was awarded to 43 providers as a result of their request to increase their fees for 2018-19.
Well, thank you. That's very helpful. You have the same figures for national living wage as I have, so that's right. About a 4.4% increase.
Yeah.
So we are where we are. What is the? I've looked at other councils, so I'm keen to know what the council's intention to deal with adult social care in 2019-2020, which is the last of the 3 years that the government have been kind enough to allow you to increase by 6%. Other authorities have gone for 2-3%. You've ended up with 5.5%, is that right? So you only have 0.5% available for next year. So recognising, as you did, the need which will rise, how are you going to deal with this additional need?
Thank you. Sorry, is that the question? Because
no, but I was going to give you some options. Okay, so A, B, and C. The first one is...
can I suggest that you need to stick to a succinct question, because otherwise we won't get through.
This is my sheet. This is my sheet of paper. I've cut the first bit out because I had a conversation with Pauline Alexander earlier on. So I'm here now. I have these 3 lines which I shall struggle to read.
It's a very long statement.
Sorry?
It's a very long statement rather than a question.
So, which option will the will you decide to use to make up the? Will you press the government to give the council more money? Press them to increase adult social care by a further 3%? In the absence of these options, will the council consider a successful referendum early next year to get the electorate to approve a larger council tax increase? A, B or C, or maybe D, if you have a D.
Well, we haven't set any figure as for next year. I mean,
Most councils have.
Well, we haven't, but there is a D. There's always a D, and that's actually to reduce the demand on services, and that's why I've called for colleagues across the borough, the council, cross-party members, to get together with me to look at ways that we can actually address some of these issues that you've raised.
Have you notified your clients?
Thank you very much.
Intention. Have you notified your clients of that intention?
Okay, the next question this evening is from Diane Birch. Would you like to come forward?
Good evening. So Tony Johnson reported in the local Wokingham paper, dated last week, the 19th of July, that the council leader said the residents sent us a clear message on the 3rd of May. If our residents feel that they are not being listened to, then we need to redouble our efforts to show that we have taken on board what they have to say. Bearing this in mind, why does it appear that they are not listening to the parents and children, at least at the Key Patch and Murray Road crossings, who realise not only how dangerous these alternative crossings will be at their particular locations, but according to the survey undertaken by an independent road safety expert in April of last year, I believe you all have a copy, and there is a PTO on the back, I'm afraid. That the conclusion from the Murray Road crossing was that under the justification criteria outlined in section 6, this location does not require a pedestrian facility. Might I also point out that according to these figures, between the hours of 5 and 6 p.m, only 10 pedestrians cross the road at the crossing. Announcing that other road users can safely cross the road using the automated crossings doesn't apply to this site. So, to the untrained eye, it does look like a needless and unwanted expense. Question. Bearing all this in mind, would the council please consider delaying the installation of automated crossings, at least at these 2 sites, until a further and perhaps more detailed survey can be completed, instead of what appears to be trying to rush through these unwanted and expensive alternatives?
Hello, Diane. Nice to see you. Formal crossings such as zebra and puffin controls are safe forms or crossing facilities and the designs for the proposed crossings have been through an independent road safety audit to confirm this. The assessment process you refer to uses the Department of Transport guidance to establish if a pedestrian crossing is required. This guidance assumes no existing crossings provided and considers pedestrian demand and traffic over the entire day. As you have highlighted, because the maximum demand is during 2 relatively short periods of the day, and the assessment considers the demand throughout the day, the survey results when analysed showed that no crossing was necessary. However, recognising that the demand is focused over 2 short periods of the day, we use the road safety GB guidance for establishing if a crossing controller would be justified. This assessment would also identify whether a formal crossing could be considered rather than providing a patrol. Assessment for both Murray Road and Keephatch identified a patroller would be justified. Where the assessment identified one would be justified, we have proposed to install a formal crossing as an alternative. Delaying the delivery of the crossings and undertaking further surveys is not considered necessary, as it will not change the outcome of the assessment. However, as a result of the concerns you and the public have raised, the designs of both crossings are being reconsidered with a view to providing traffic signal control crossings instead.
Is that not Midlands? Is that like... Thank you.
You've got a supplementary question.
We heard of the death a few years ago of a school crossing patroller up north. The details were discussed at one of our meetings, and we learned that the accident was probably caused by the driver being unable to see the school crossing patroller in the road due to low sun and probably glare off a wet road. Are there any additional safety measures that they would be willing to take at the Murray Road crossing? Because during the winter months, the low winter sun and glare off wet roads are a real hazard in the months of December and January. I have had a few drivers confess that they genuinely cannot see me on the crossing, and of course I'm always in high-vis clothing. There is a real concern on my part that if they can't see me in high-vis wear, what chance does any pedestrian, child or adult, have in normal clothing?
Okay, thank you for your supplementary. When I was with you the other day, as I said to a question earlier, I was very impressed with how motorists came up to the crossing and were relatively slow. They weren't driving at 60 miles an hour or even 30 or 40. There was,
well, as it is 20, you'd hope so.
And the parked cars, to some extent, also do provide for drivers slowing down because of the parked cars design. However, I do think that perhaps there needs to be some examination of some of the parking aspects. I think you and I saw the 2 cars arguing as to who had the right of way. And I noticed that perhaps a couple of the cars in front of that car have been parked there for quite a while, so I don't know what the parking restrictions are. So I will look into things a bit more at that site, because I do take your point. I think the issue of the low sun, perhaps we need to put covers over some of the lights when they're installed so that they can be seen and they're not, what's the phrase I'm looking for?
Blinded
by the sun. So I take your point and thank you for that, and we will take it into account.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, the next agenda item is item 22, which is the member question time, and there's a period of 20 minutes allowed for members to ask questions submitted under notice. So the first question this evening is from Councillor Gary Cowan, and that's to you. Thank you, Gary.
Okay. It's very confusing for members and the public to establish the exact payments in total received by members of the executive and the deputies for all the various roles in which they receive payments from within the council and on outside bodies, for example the fire service and NED payments. Can the leader of the council provide all this information now, please?
Thank you, Councillor Cowan. It's very confusing for, the information is not collated in the way that puts it into one single place, and this not only is done, and this is only done for the financial year. NED payments or non-executive director payments are recorded separately for each company, as people who know. All of this is available on the council's website. Rather than reading out all of these, there's a printout. Julian will bring it round for you, my able assistant. For the 2017-18 Special Responsibility Allowance payments and outside body notifications and non-executive director payments also. For obvious reasons, payments such as special responsibility allowances will be for those roles held up until the end of 2017-18 period. And for the others, they obviously get put on at the end of the year because things can change mid-year also. I'm guessing you probably have a supplementary.
Yes. I mean, you did say at the last local elections, you sent a clear message that we're listening, and I think you even made an observation about painting all rooms at the same time, which really comes back to this type of thing. To me, it's a very simplistic request that every member of the executive, everybody within the council as members, would get a source of income. It should be very simple and easy for the residents to be able to say, what does Council Weeks get? And they just go to Council Week, goes bang, bang, bang. What does Council Cowan get? Bang, bang, bang. And it's not that way. It is all there, and I appreciate that, and I thank you for that. But it's very, very modelled, and I would like to ask, would it not be possible for the council to look at a more simplistic way so the residents could be able to look at it, or individual councillors, see how much they're being paid, and be aware of it?
Thank you, Gary, for your supplementary. I note that one of the members of the IRP is probably keenly listening to this evening. It was tried to be simplified last year, and I believe there have been some issues in terms of trying to get it all in one place on the website. And as I said in the first part of my question, we can ask again in terms of trying to make it simpler and on one page. But as I said, the information needs to come at the end of the year in case things change. So we have to take into consideration that. But we can try and simplify it, of course. The more transparent we are about that, then obviously the better.
I would agree. Thank you.
Okay, the next question this evening is from Imogen Shepherd-Gray, and that's a question for you. Okay.
Hello. Recently, the local government ombudsman upheld a complaint against Woking Borough Council where it failed to provide suitable transport for a child with additional needs. From what I saw of the case, there seemed to be a number of serious failings in the understanding of the needs of that child, and I'd like to know what training and advice is provided to the drivers who provide these school transport services, especially when working with children who need specific care.
Thank you for your question. Not on school crossing.
Yes, it is about school.
All licensed taxi drivers undergo criminal checks, medical and knowledge checks. Insofar as specific training, school transport drivers and passenger assistants are provided with safeguarding training and guidance which includes roles and responsibilities, conduct, expected behaviour, standards and guidelines for passengers with additional needs. In addition, should the child require specific care, then training for the driver and passenger assistant for medical or behavioural issues can be provided, up to and including the provision of NHS nursing staff. Since the local government ombudsman's decision was upheld against Woking Borough Council, specific appeals process training has been provided by an external law firm to the 12 officers and 4 members that have an involvement in the appeals process and appeals panel. All officers and staff that received the specific training now have the knowledge, information and ability to deal with further appeals, especially appeals that are high in complexity.
Do you have a supplementary?
I certainly do. What you talked about was appeals rather than actually helping the people to deal with the children. But okay, on page 45 of your report, it talks particularly about continued pressures to school transport reflected in the increasing costs with SEN services out of borough placements. I'd like to know more about what is being done and what you're going to do next year to reduce, to ensure that the school placements within the borough locally for every child that's possible to place locally.
I'm not sure that's a transport question, to be
Probably
honest.
is, no.
Do you want to answer it, or should we give her a written
I
response?
think I might possibly answer it when we come to Councillor Bray's question, but
Well, it's got on 45,
happy
so
to-
looking at the budget,
to
the amount of money
answer it
that's
now.
been spent
Have a go.
on school transport, particularly with
could you
SEN
repeat
children.
the actual question that you asked, please?
Supplementary.
Ah,
Supplementary.
It's a supplementary question.
Just
Continuing on from this, it's looking at page 45, which has got the entry about the pressures on home to school transport and an increasing cost of SEN children, because I know we're shipping them all over the place. I want to know what are you doing to reduce this, because it's better for children to be in a local school and rather than shipping them to schools out of the borough.
That's right, and it will come into the context of the SEND strategy, the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities strategy that we're going to be producing later this year. The idea is that, well, already there's been an SEN strategy group set up to have a look at solutions to the cost, which is what Councillor Bray's question is about, the cost of sending children outside the borough, which is very, very big indeed, and it's something that I'm keeping a very close eye on. One of the possible solutions that this group might come up with will be to bring more children back inside the borough. That might possibly be to involve building a new school, which obviously can't happen overnight, but that could be one of the solutions. Certainly it's absolutely key to bring children back into the borough where they can be brought back into the borough, because it's very expensive and it does have the transport problems. There will obviously be some children whose needs can only be met outside the borough, and they will continue to be met in that way. But one of the consequences of bringing children back inside the borough into placements within our area will be that there is less spend on transport and less need to use drivers to transport them to school. So I hope that that will, in a roundabout way, answer your question.
We'll do for now. Thank you.
Thank you, and hopefully better outcomes at the local level. Next question is from Lindsay Ferris. Councillor Lindsay Ferris, and I believe it's to Councillor Pollock again.
Yes, busy tonight. I have considerable concerns that the financial information presented for the closure of the School Constant Patrol Service on pages 20-21 of this agenda are inaccurate and omit a number of ongoing revenue costs associated with the provision and future running of the crossings facilities proposed to be provided. Why have these ongoing revenue costs been excluded, as it gives a false impression of any supposed savings?
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay, for your question. I believe the costs you're referring to relate to any interest payments associated with capital borrowing and the ongoing maintenance and operation costs once the sites have been installed. I can confirm that the majority of capital funding has been allocated from grants, with a very small proportion from developer contributions. Therefore, there are no additional costs associated with borrowing in this part. As for maintenance and operation, these costs are relatively small and will be absorbed within the existing maintenance budgets. The new lights will all be LED, so power consumption and therefore cost will be very low. And in terms of faults, the most common fault is bulbs requiring replacement. With LED, this is no longer a regular issue, as these installations will be new. Any maintenance or faults during the first few years will be covered under warranty. For new traffic signal installations, the approximate annual cost is less than £600 per site.
Supplementary.
Yes. I beg on the debate to differ if necessary on the interest payments, because not all the money will be come from that, because it's a question of how the money is funded, so I will query that later. I also, I'll just make a comment before I get to my question. You mentioned about the decision was made a little while ago about this. My understanding is it was the first phase that the decision was made, and that the paper presented would say they would review the second phase. So I have an issue with that. And also you were asked about not being able to do something about keeping the any school patrollers. You know you can do that by a supplementary estimate, so that's not an issue. The issue I now have is there is an ongoing replacement cost for these control systems. They last somewhere between 10 and 15 years. So somewhere in the cost will need to be a replacement cost. And I also would believe that the maintenance of 7 new crossings, is what you're putting here, would actually be quite a significant increase on the number. So I will be asking you to come up with a specific issue regarding how you're going to increase the contract associated with the maintenance of the crossings that we have in the borough, and how that will come, because I think the figures that you mentioned of £600 a year is actually low, but I would like you to provide that, and if you provide it by writing down, so I'm happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
If I may, I said the maintenance costs are relatively small. I don't think that's likely to change. The number of crossings here, and there are other crossings that we have in the borough. The answer says that it's not going to significantly increase the maintenance budget. But I will seek to get the answer, the more detailed answer you've asked. But I think that the answer I have given is accurate.
There's also the issue about replacement.
Thank you very much. The next question this evening is from Councillor Kruger, and it's for Councillor Henry Simons.
It doesn't relate to school crossing tackles. The revenue monitoring report shows a predicted overspend in the schools block of over £1 million this year, on top of over 500,000 last year. The overspend is in the part of the budget that covers children with special educational needs. There is reference in the report on page 43 to an invitation to the Department for Education to visit the Council in mid-July to discuss the budget pressures and potential solutions. So what was the outcome of that meeting?
You're quite right, Councillor Bray, and the meeting did indeed take place. The DFE were sympathetic to the issue, but did not have any solutions in terms of financial help. They are aware of the concerns raised by Woking Borough Council, and they did listen to what we said. They informed us that many councils are facing the same pressures and that other areas have even greater financial issues. They're currently touring the country to gain views of many councils and the concerns and issues that face them regarding the high needs funding. A statement or consultation will be made later in the autumn term.
Yes, I do, thank you. I think we all know that school budgets in this area are clearly under pressure, generally, not just in the high needs block, which is why the schools rejected the council's proposal that the funding should be cut to them to help meet the deficit in the high needs block. In the light of the DFE's not exactly helpful visit, what else are you going to do to help Woking schools get a fair share of funding?
Thank you. This overspend, as you'll understand, is something I inherited, but it is something that I am very concerned about, and it's something that I am, as I said earlier, keeping a close eye on. I don't want to repeat myself too much, but the essence of what we're doing is to establish this SEN strategy group. In fact, it has already been established, and it's doing service planning in the light of the pressure on resources. One reason being that there are more children around in the borough who have special educational needs. One of the reasons being there are more houses being built and more families are moving into the area. That strategy group is going to identify all possible actions to reduce that overspend, and one of them, as I mentioned earlier, could possibly be by building a new special needs school in the medium term. There are other examples that they might possibly come up with. You can read more of them on page 43 of this agenda. The outcome of these discussions will come forward in a new SEND strategy later in the year, but it's currently being worked on and we're looking at all possible angles. Okay.
Thank you very much. The next question from David Hare, I believe he's not in tonight, so I'm going to go to the next question after that, which is from Councillor Burgess, and I believe that's for Councillor Pollock again.
Thank you. The school crossing patrol consultation raised a significant number of safety concerns. With regard to the Keep Hatch Road crossing, these concerns are backed up by the independent road safety audit. The audit states that the proposed site of this zebra crossing is not safe for two reasons: poor visibility and, more crucially, proximity to the roundabout. The audit states, and I quote, "The close proximity of the proposed zebra pedestrian crossing to the roundabout could result in an increased risk of collisions." Are the findings of the road safety audit going to be ignored at the Keep Hatch Road site?
No, not at all. All findings from a road safety audit are an integral part of the design process, and where applicable, recommendations that have been identified have been adopted and included in the final scheme design. The road safety audit did not identify the design would provide an unsafe crossing facility, but highlighted recommendations that, if implemented, would improve safety further. With regard to the hedgerow, clearance has started on site. The final design for the crossing has been proposed as far north as possible without taking pedestrians away from the design.
Do you have supplementary?
Yes. I'd just like to focus on the location of the crossing. So I don't believe that the crossing should be placed where it was originally proposed because of what it says in the road safety audit. It can't be placed much further north because that is, as the road safety audit suggested, because that's not practical. I don't think anyone thinks it would be. It can't be placed at the south side of the roundabout because of the drop curves and the houses there. So do you not agree with me that the only safe solution in this particular setting is a school crossing patrol on the south side of the roundabout?
I'm advised that it is safe on the north side of the roundabout at a suitable distance from the roundabout to ensure that there is safety.
Thank you very much indeed. The next question this evening is from Councillor Andy Croy, and always running on the deadline. Always running against the clock.
I've got a solution to that. I'd like to ask the question standing in my name, please.
The decision being made today is not based on financial considerations. That decision was made in 2015, and we are today deciding on whether we continue to implement that decision.
Do you have a supplementary?
That was very quick. The decision was made in 2015. Indeed, you said earlier, we decided to withdraw the funding in 2015, and that's why we are where we are today. So what you're saying is there are no revenue implications for the maintenance of the high friction road surface, there are no revenue implications for the continued clearance of the vegetation on, for example, the Keep Hatch site, and there are no revenue implications, for example, in the changes in the parking markings that you've alluded to in the Mow Road. All over these sites, there are revenue implications that are not included in the financial assessment. So the question is, why are you making a decision based on incorrect financial information?
I don't agree with you that there are missing revenue implications, because I think that what we're doing is actually spending capital money to make these places safe.
Thank you very much indeed. The next item on the agenda this evening, matters for consideration, item 23, which is the School Crossing Patrol Service, the consultation report 2018. On the agenda, it's page 15 to 30, and I'm going to hand over to Councillor Anthony Pollock.
We've had quite a long session on this already. The only change I want to highlight, and I alluded to it in some of the answers I gave earlier. After consultation with local members, we will look to redesign crossings at 4 of the sites. Officers will come back to me with redesigns, and the new crossings will take 3 to 5 weeks to build, and it will be necessary to reprogram the delivery of these sites. But otherwise, everything in the papers is as it is.
4 sites. It's not complete. It's missing half the paper.
Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Wilkinson.
It's an observation actually. Certainly as far as Malden Primary School and Silverdale Road at Hurley, the residents are very much looking forward to that crossing, and I've been getting a lot of positive feedback about it. So if we could keep that one, that would be brilliant.
Any other questions or queries about the report?
Which sites are you on?
Councillor Pollock. The 4 that you mentioned earlier. Would you like to, for the record, read those out?
Murray Road, Norris Avenue, Keep Hatch Road and Hurricane Way.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, any further questions or queries? No, okay. The recommendation is on page 15. It's that the executive agree that number one, Woking Borough Council continue with its proposal to provide safe permanent crossings at 7 locations that currently have a school crossing patroller, and following their installation, remove the school crossing patrol service once permanent crossings are complete, as set out in option 2, appendix 1 of the report. And number 2 of the recommendation is all affected schools are reminded that they have access to the council's road safety and My Journey teams, who can facilitate further road safety training for pupils if requested. All those in favour of the report as set out in the agenda? Any abstentions? Any objections? The next item on the agenda is item 24. That's the shareholders' report, item 24, and that's page 31 to page 38. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Julian McGee-Sumner.
Thank you very much. This is good news item for the to consider. So the budgeting monitoring position to the 31st of May 2018 and the operational update would draw your attention to a couple of things. Woking Housing Limited have transferred 123 new homes to Berrybrook, all modern homes, generating a profit of 600,000, which is positive. I can't believe they're leaving for the best bit. WHL were able to pay off £1 million of their borrowing as well, so that's very sort of positive. So that's good news. And with regards to Optilis, again, it's a good news story. Optilis continue to deliver on behalf of this local authority and our local residents, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Zalewski.
I'm particularly pleased with Optalis. Can we congratulate them on the delivery of their savings and at the same time providing the excellent service? So can we congratulate them? That's basically my question.
Absolutely, we do. They continue to deliver a good service on behalf of our residents, and they continue to do so under stringent sort of financial conditions that this authority finds itself in. So, yes, absolutely.
Any other questions? No, okay. The recommendations are set out on page 31. 2 recommendations. All those in favour of noting the report as set out on the agenda? Thank you very much indeed. The next item this evening is the Revenue Monitoring 2018 to 2019 Quarter 1 update. That's page 39 to page 54. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Julian McGee-Sumner.
Thank you. Again, revenue monitoring, so it's looking at the first quarter for this particular year. There's no carry forward, which is pretty good. Really, the 2 items are at 3 and 4, so the supplementary estimates, but happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or queries? Okay. The recommendations are set out on page 39, 5 recommendations. I won't read them, but you've all got them in front of you. Is everyone happy to take the recommendations as written? All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Unanimous. The next item 46 on the agenda, is the Capital Monitoring 2018 to 19 end of June 2018 report, page 55 onwards. I'm going to hand over to Councillor McGee-Sumner.
Again, thank you very much. Again, it's a sort of snapshot at this moment in time as of the end of June, so the end of quarter 1. So we've got the capital budget and where we are within the sort of financial year. It's fairly usual advance of the spending commitments at this stage at the end of the first quarter. But again, happy to take any questions.
Anyone have any questions on this report? No? Okay. Okay, the recommendation is set out on page 55. The Executive is asked to note the quarter 1 position for the capital budget as set out in Appendix A in the report. All of those in favour? Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. The next item this evening is the Treasury Management Outturn 2017 to 2018 report, and it's page 61 to 88 on the agenda. Again, I'm going to hand over to Councillor McGeeson.
Thank you very much. Anyway, another good news story. As you know, we have an internal Treasury Management team and an external management team. The achieved result is averaging 1.68% when you consider that the average outside is 0.21. So it is actually a good news story. Every penny helps, as one particular supermarket used to say. So yeah, I think it's a good news story, and having sort of two particular teams working on this at any one time seems to balance out quite nicely. So I'm very keen to continue.
Thank you. Other supermarkets are available. Councillor Pollock, do you have any questions?
I have a first one would be, I note that no new external borrowing was taken. So well done. Congratulations.
I've learned to say no quite a lot.
It affects the answer I gave earlier. It just shows that there are no external borrowing implications. But the question I want to ask you was the average return of 1.68%. How does that compare with what other people are achieving?
Interesting question. When you look at our neighbouring authorities, we're better than all of them.
Thank you very much. It was a good benchmark. Any other questions or queries? No, much indeed. All of those in favour of the recommendations on page 61, first one is to note that this report was presented to the Audit Committee on the 6th of June 2018, and the second is to approve and recommend to Council the Treasury Management Annual Report for 2017 to 18 and the actual 2017-18 prudential indicators within the report. All of those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. The next item this evening is item 28, which is the neighbourhood planning for Wokingham area designation sign-off procedure, and it's page 89 to 100, and that's Councillor Stuart Munro.
Sure. Neighbourhood planning process gives communities the power to develop a shared vision for their area, which I think most people know, but I think the process of this paper really is to note the changes to the Neighbourhood Planning Regulations 2012 as amended in this report, which asks for the two particular parish councils that I mentioned here submitted applications, and we have a right and a duty to approve that. So really, the detail in the report, and really straightforward purpose of the report, is to recognise that application that we've taken.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any questions or queries on this particular report? Councillor Hallier-Simons, thank you.
It's not a question, it's just a brief comment. To say that Woking Without, of course, is my own parish. I'm really pleased that the Woking Without Parish Council has taken this initiative. This sort of action's long overdue, and I'd like to see more parishes doing it. It's what the government's locality agenda is fundamentally about. So I fully support this, not just for Woking Without, but for Twyford too.
Thank you very much indeed, and I would echo that. And the ward that Anthony and I represent have already gone through this, and it's great in order to bring planning right to the grassroots. Does anyone else have any further comments? Councillor Weeks.
Again, not so much a question as a comment, but obviously there's the added benefit for the parishes of enabling them to have a greater share of the developer contributions.
And we're busy doing
Thank you. Thank you. And if there is a lot of development in that area, of course, that allows them to have much more control over what they do in terms of where those funds go. So it's very good news for those communities. Okay, the recommendations are set out on page 89 in the report. I won't read them out, there are three. But you all have them in front of you. All of those in favour of recommendations are set out? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item, 29 this evening, is the draft Central and Eastern Berkshire Joint Minerals and Waste Plan. It's a consultation. It's on pages 101 to 112. Sorry, Councillor Norman. Sorry.
Great, thank you. This is a joint paper between the strategic planning and the environmental portfolios, so we're sort of sharing sponsorship of this, if you like. So Woking Borough is preparing a plan, and it's a joint plan with the Royal Boroughs of Windsor, Maidenhead, Bracknell Forest, Reading Borough Council. So it's an East Berkshire minerals and waste plan. And we are using the services of Hampshire County Council because they have the expertise and they've done it fairly recently. It's about 20 years since this authority last produced such a plan. So hence using Hampshire to help us prepare it. You can see from the text that there are 2 sites that have made it through this process within Woking Borough. There was a call for sites, and sites came forward and were assessed, and two of those have made it through to this plan, this draft plan at this stage. So those sites are Bridge Farm, which is for mineral extraction, and Starworks for waste processing. So this paper is to seek permission to go out to public consultation, so we can now take views of members of the public into account in further drafting this plan, and then a further version will be brought forward in due course. So the period for the consultation starts in early August, I think it's the 4th of August, and runs through to October. So because it's a holiday period, it's been an extended period for consultation to make sure that we can allow everybody to comment on that. So I propose we move ahead with this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rawlinson. Just to reiterate, it is a draft plan at this point, and I'd recommend as many people as possible get involved in the consultation. It covers a great many different wards, and I don't know whether Councillor Pollock has got a question, and Councillor Munro as well.
Obviously this affects my ward personally. There are a number of issues relating to transport and roads and capacity, particularly with Highden Road and the aspects of the width of Highden Road. Can you assure me that before anyone starts moving stuff around, that the road network will be assessed and any improvements that are required will be implemented before anything happens, and that local people who are impacted by this development will be properly consulted, and not just tick box approach, but there will be some proper consultation so that they can understand the implications for them, and that we can put in as much mitigation as possible, because this is going to go on for a long time.
Yes, absolutely. We've already, in the last week, carried out public meetings, one in your area and the other one in the Mill Hill Parish Hall on Tuesday evening this week. Those were extra meetings, we weren't required to have them, but we had them to alert the local communities to the fact that this consultation is about to start, seeking their engagement in that process. So there's quite a long way to go in this, putting this plan together, but even once a plan is put together, it's only a high-level plan. So similarly to the local plan, it requires then anybody that wants to actually undertake work to come forward with an application, a planning application. So all the normal processes of planning applications, consultations, going to the various parts of the council to look at things like road impact of road movements and adequacy of roads will all be studied in detail at that point, and these may or may not be approved depending on how that process goes.
Sorry, now just you mentioned the public meeting that took place in Arklefield. It was very sparsely attended compared to the meeting I had in Shinfield a few days earlier, which was overflowing with gunnels. My impression is that whereas the meeting I put together, we actually delivered leaflets to individual houses in the area, and that actually improved attendance. But I don't think the communication. Also, I think a lot of people found it difficult to find because the postcode wasn't on Google because it was a new facility. So I I take your point that consultation has happened, but I would suggest that the public wouldn't necessarily feel that they have been consulted or informed, and I think there was some conversation about holding something in Shinfield itself, which I think would be sensible.
So I think during this consultation period running until October, the intention would be to hold further public meetings. So if you have a suggestion of a venue and a sort of date during that period, then that would be helpful. There's probably a few more people now than before know where Haverfield Green leisure centre is, so that's maybe not a bad thing. But I take your point. The one at Mill Hill is always pretty well attended.
Thank you. Any other? No. And I would support that. Having another meeting in a different venue as it crosses so many boundaries would be a very good idea. Okay, the recommendations, of which there are 3, are set out on page 100 and 101. All those in favour of the recommendations are set out? Thank you. Item 30, as we heard before, was withdrawn from this evening. Item 31 is the Health and Safety Annual Report 2017 to 18, pages 127 to 138. And I'll hand over to Councillor Jorgensen.
Yes, thank you very much. As with last year, this is a report that the Borough Council has produced. It's not required to produce it, but we feel in the interests of transparency and also encouraging other local groups to do similar things, we have produced this report on our health and safety performance during the year. It's fair to say that our performance can be viewed positively. We're not to be complacent as a result of that, but it is fairly positive, and the reportable injury rate at our council is significantly lower than the national average for similar things. Unfortunately, there was one reportable incident during the year where one person who was tasked with collecting newspapers from a local newsagent for use in a community library slipped and fell on an icy pathway and fractured an ankle. So that was not very nice at all. And the procedures in that case have been changed since. So to avoid that, the recurrence of that incident. So constantly looking for employees to come forward with concerns and near misses so that we can learn and improve the way that we do things. And this is just a summary report of the year's activity. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions on this report or inquiries? Okay, thank you very much indeed. The recommendations, of which are 2, are set out on pages 127. The Executive has requested to note the corporate health and safety performance for 2017 to 18 and endorse the approach described and the health and safety priorities for the current municipal year, which is 2018 to 19. All those in favour of the recommendations? Unanimously. The next agenda item this evening is item 32, which is the new primary school provider recommendation, and that's Councillor Pauline Jorgensen who's going to take this evening. No? Oh, sorry, Alice, I'm sorry. Doing the wrong one.
Okay, it is our role as a local authority to seek expressions of interest for who can run our new schools, and then to make recommendations to the Secretary of State, who then has the power to make decisions. But the benefit of doing this, because it is more than just a formality, benefit is it does give us some control over whom the government chooses and allows us to put in what we know of local conditions. The priority for doing this is the new Shinfield West School, so that people can over this coming academic year know who's going to be running it and can make their preferences, and that will help to sort out whether we need those places and what other places we might possibly need. So it's quite important that we get on with doing this. But there are other equally good reasons for doing it for the other 2 schools as well, and they're outlined on the page 141, so I won't go through them because we can all read. But it is a formality and it's something we have to do. It's something that is to our benefit to do.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Clark, I believe you've got a question.
There was quite a lot of comment in Shinfield last year when the notification or the publicity around Shinfield West was not particularly, or was perceived, so it was perceived to be not particularly high, and therefore people didn't apply because they didn't know that they could apply, and because they didn't apply, the numbers were very high, and it was decided it wasn't needed. And I had quite a lot of comment that people would have applied if they know. So could I ask that we do make sure that people do know, and that the applicant actually wants to run the school rather than seemingly not want to run the school. And we're happy to help through the parish council or ourselves in publicising this fact.
Indeed. Thank you. You have my absolute assurance on that, and thank you for the offer of involving local parish council and yourself, which I'm sure we'll take up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. All new schools or academies are run very much like businesses, and it was regrettable that the last provider did not do enough advertising locally in order to attract the numbers, and regrettably they didn't open that year. So one of the things that needs to be taken into account when choosing a new provider is that they have got the energy to go out there and do that. So the recommendation is on page 139. All those in favour of the recommendation set out? Thank you very much indeed, it's unanimous. Okay, the next agenda item is item 33, which is developing a memorandum of understanding for Wokingham Integrated Partnership of Health and Social Care, and this report is taken by Councillor Richard Dolinsky.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The purpose of the memorandum is to set out how Wokingham Integrated Partnership actually works together. And we've got a very, very good, strong partnership as it is with our partners in the NHS, Berkshire West Clinical Commissioning Group, Berkshire Healthcare Foundation Trust, Wokingham GP Alliance, and the Royal Berkshire NHS Foundation Trust. And what this memorandum of understanding will do will actually strengthen that relationship, so we can continue to deliver some excellent health and wellbeing outcomes for our residents. Just to note that the MOU is not legally binding, it's just a statement of joint intent, and it indicates broad principles that the partners seek to apply. But as I said, it's about strengthening the relationship between our key partners and delivering ongoing and continued health and wellbeing outcomes for our residents.
Does anyone have any questions? No, okay, thank you very much indeed. The recommendation is set out on page 145, and it's that the Executive agree and endorse the Memorandum of Understanding between the following partners, and it's Wokingham Borough Council, Berkshire West, CCG, that's the Clinical Commissioning Group, and that's for the Wokingham locality, Berkshire Healthcare and NHS Foundation Trust, and the Wokingham GP Alliance, and the Royal Berkshire NHS Foundation Trust. All those in favour of the recommendation? Unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, and the last item this evening. Thank you very much indeed all for coming along.